So let's start at the beginning. My name is Matthew Butler. Um, I was born and raised in Utah. Joined the Army in 90 at the age of 21. Thought I would stay in for 3 years and then, get out, use the GI Bill. I was actually in the reserves to begin with. Um, and I was going to use the GI Bill and stay in the reserves and go to school and do all that. Um, I ended up staying in for 27 years. I got commissioned while I was going to school. I went to ROTC, got a commission into the field artillery. Was in the guard then. Uh, wasn't my first choice. Kind of made that decision at the request of my wife at the time, who didn't want me to have an army lifestyle, I guess. Um, but I soon realized that I'd, missed out on my calling in life and applied for active duty. Well, I joined the National Guard Special Forces unit um, and went to what they call selection and then what they call the Q course. Um, and while I was completing my training, I applied for active duty and was accepted. So essentially, I spent, that was in 99, 98, 99, 98. So I would spend the next 20 years on active duty in special operations. Third group, um, a tier 1 unit in the Virginia area, um, back to third group, over to JSOC, over to SOCOM, and then finally retired out of a unit called Asymmetric Warfare Group that doesn't exist anymore. I did 42 months of combat, spread out over 6 deployments, and both Iraq and Afghanistan. One time in Iraq, OIF 1, so that was 2003 and 4. And then the next 5 deployments were all Afghanistan. The next one was with 75th Ranger Regiment in Afghanistan, and then 2 more with 3rd Group, and then one with JSOC, and then one with the NATO Special Operations Command. So I retired in 2017, and it was and moved back to Utah, and it was then that I guess the easiest way to say it is that the chickens come home to roost. I was dealing with, you know, had been diagnosed by the, I guess, the mental health providers within the Army that I've been diagnosed with PTSD, well, actually, complex PTSD, suicidal ideation, treatment resistant depression, alcoholism, and addiction. And suicidal ideation. Did I say that one? Yeah, I had everything, but I didn't believe it, or I thought that they were wrong, or I thought it was no big deal. Thought everybody was this way, or that I was the only one this way. Either way, there was no point in talking about it because either everybody was that way or nobody was that way. And if everybody's that way, nobody's talking about it, then I certainly wasn't going to talk about it. And if only I was that way, of course, I'm not going to talk about it. So I just kind of lived with it, medicated, antidepressants from the VA, was drinking heavily, drinking, uh, you know, somewhere to half to a full fifth of whiskey a night to sleep. I was usually mixing it with Ambien. Um, real deadly combination. Somehow survived that. Um, moved back to Utah after retirement. Um, and yeah, I was. It was harder. I think it was harder for me to conceal from everybody, right? Because now I'm back home, around family and whatnot. And yeah, um, summer of 18, I got into a disagreement with my family. Um, it wasn't over anything important. It was over a tree, and I felt really bad about that. So I made an effort to. Well, I went to my parents' house to try to mend that fence a little bit, but instead the argument escalated, and yeah, the argument escalated. Um, and by that, I was dropping f bombs and cursing and shouting and screaming and probably making threats. And I had enough presence of mind to realize that I was out of control or approaching out of control space. And so I stood up to leave and, said F you and F this and started walking out the door, kind of a fight flight. If I don't want to fight, so I'm going to flight. I wasn't going to freeze. We're taught not to freeze, right, in the military. So we'll just get out of the situation. And on my way out, my dad said, he said, get back here. Later, talking about that with him, what he was saying was, get back here and apologize to your mother for the language you've used in our home. That's not what he said, but that's what he wanted. That's what his intention was. All I heard was get back here. So now, if I'm not going to freeze and you just took away flight, then all we got left is fight. So I offered a sort of a shot over the bow, so to speak, a warning shot by punching the wall and saying, don't come near me. And that's when he turned and told my sister to call the cops. And I thought, okay, fine, haven't touched anybody, haven't done anything. I thought, right, like it's just a hole in the wall. It's still awful, but it wasn't on a person. I didn't touch anybody. So I went out and sat in my truck and waited for the cops to arrive. They got there. I told them my story. And about the same time I told this, no big details. Like, yeah, we had an argument and I punched a wall as a way of, offering a warning shot. He was inside talking to my parents for about 45 minutes. And, by this point, I'm just super impatient. It took him 45 minutes to get there. So, now I've wasted almost an hour and a half, 2 hours of my day. I just wanted to go, really, it was a Saturday. I just wanted to go mow my lawn and get on with my day. And he came out and just said, yeah, Mr. Butler, I need you to step out of the car and put your hands on the hood. And, the shock, disbelief, confusion. Like, what on earth did my parents tell him that I'm suddenly getting arrested? The reality is that in Utah, if there's destruction of property during a domestic disturbance, it's an automatic trip to jail. And so I found myself in jail. I found myself in jail that day. I was only in for, essentially the majority of the day. Um, I made my own bail, got myself out, um, and yeah. The two things I tell everybody that there's two things that I realized from that experience. The first thing I realized is that I have a problem that, yeah, um, I'm not being honest with. I'm not being honest to myself about, let alone everybody else. Like really, like that's the truth, right? Like, if you can't be honest with yourself, who else are you going to be honest with? Um, so I wasn't being honest with myself about my situation, the seriousness of it, the gravity of it. And the second thing I realized is that I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again, and expecting different results, right? Like, okay, I'm taking the pills, I'm going to therapy, I'm in a recovery group, although I'm not sober. Um, yeah, I was doing all the things that I was told to do. I was doing all the things that were suggested, and yet now I got a pair of handcuffs on my wrists and my hands behind my back and laying prone in this SUV, cruiser, cop SUV, police SUV, on the way, 45-minute ride to the jail. Um, so something's not working. Um, so I made it my mission, uh, when I got out. I knew I needed help, and I needed different help. I needed something that would work, because I was doing all the things that I was told to do, and yet I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel safe. I constantly felt suicidal, depressed, angry, and had lots of addiction and dependency issues, coping mechanisms. And I knew that was not the way I needed to live. And so I was like, okay, I need to do something differently. I need to, um, I needed to do something different. So I started to research, how does one cure PTSD? If you type that into Google, the very first thing you see, kind of a summary, search result that they put up there, sometimes often in front of any pages or whatever, is essentially, probably a bunch of information that was scraped off of things like the National, Health Institute's website, or Centers for Disease Control, things like that. It was basically just a summary that said, you're screwed, buddy. Um, there is no cure, and good luck. We can offer you some, your healthcare providers can offer you medications that might help with the symptoms. That's kind of the conventional wisdom that's out there. And um, me being me, didn't accept that as the answer. And so this was really kind of the first time since my diagnosis in 2011 that I took my mental health seriously, that I made it a priority in my life, that I was going to take ownership over it. And so I just kept digging and digging and digging. And then I saw this word that I didn't know how to pronounce at the time, but the word was ayahuasca. So I kind of made it my mission to find an ayahuasca retreat. I had the wrong impression that all I had to do was, drink the tea, and that was my finish line. Drink the tea, my problems go away. I don't have to worry about breaking my parole, going back to jail, any of that. I was just going to be suddenly a peaceful human being. Peaceful, happy human being was one cup of tea away. Um, or so I thought. Again, wrong, wrong. That's not how it works, that I later learned. But so um, yeah, made it my mission to try to find this. And as luck would have it, pandemic broke out. And I wasn't willing to travel to South America during the pandemic. Um, who knew back then? We didn't know. Like, if you go down there, you're not coming back. You might stay 6 months, quarantine. Who knew, right? So put it on the back burner, and it wasn't until 21 that I connected, and that happened through what I can only describe as divine intervention. Um, there's a saying within the plant medicine space that the medicine will call to you when you're ready. And I even had a friend who had done it, and I hit her up and said, "Hey, I'm trying to find an ayahuasca retreat. Please help me. I'll pay for your ticket. I just need to go. Like, help me, help me, help me." And she just kind of chuckled, and we were on a phone call, I believe, and we just kind of chuckled, and she just chuckled and said, "When the student's ready, the teacher will appear." I was like, "What kind of new age bullshit is that? Like, that's not helpful. Like, you know, like, yeah, go pound sand. Like I thought you were my friend. Like, more anger, more resentment, more frustration." Um, but she was right. Um, I wasn't ready. There were other things that needed to happen and needed to align first before I could I could drink. And so one day I was out walking, trying to get some exercise, doing another one of the things, and I heard a voice that just said, "Google ayahuasca retreat, Utah." And I thought, well, yeah, that's the dumbest thing ever. I'm not going to do that. Nobody is advertising ayahuasca retreats in Utah openly. Like, this is, considered a Scheduled One narcotic. No, that sounds like maybe that's entrapment, right? Like, who knows? Like, all these wild thoughts going through my head, and then, like I said, the voice wouldn't go away. Um, it was there all the time, um, saying, "Google it, Google it." So I did. I Googled ayahuasca retreat Utah, and the number one search result was an ayahuasca retreat in Utah, and it fell right on um, a space of time that I blocked out for some vacation days. So I'd already had the space on my calendar for this or for something, right? And I hadn't booked anything. I just had blocked it off well in advance. So I thought that was intriguing. So I sent an email to the email address, and I got a response right away. I asked for a phone call. Like, all of this is unfolding in the space of like a half hour. Okay. Um, so within a half hour, I'm on the phone with the shaman, and um, we had a short call, talked about more intake calls down the road, but she texted me her Venmo, and yeah, like, again, like within the space of about 30 or 45 minutes, I'd paid for an ayahuasca retreat in Utah. Um, I had a couple more intake calls with her, intake forms, all the things. You know, looking back at the 5 years since, 4.5, 5 years, um, I can tell that was. I have enough experience now to know that was a really a well-run retreat. So I got lucky because I didn't know what I was looking for, and now I know that there's a lot of red flags and there's a lot of unscrupulous providers out there, and I've experienced some of that too. But this first one was not. This first one was legit. It was good. It was professionally run. The shaman was from Mexico. Had been a doctor, a medical doctor, before her calling into shamanism, and um, yeah, she was amazing. So the day finally arrives. I go to ceremony. I was the you know, one of these things is not like the other from Sesame Street, right? That was me. I mean, I was one of the older ones. I was one of the few male. Um, I was not into the hippie new age spiritual culture at all. I didn't want anybody, I didn't want to talk to anybody, I didn't want to be around anybody. Um, I just wanted to get in there, drink the medicine, and get out. Um, this, the retreat ran from Thursday to Sunday, so this was a Thursday night. We were going to do um, two ceremonies with ayahuasca, a light ceremony with psilocybin, not a Heber's dose, and then we were going to do a nature hike with Wachuma or San Pedro um, on Sunday morning. And so signed up, go. Very first night, um, the the shaman gave everybody the medicine. She actually gave me the medicine second. Um, 45 minutes in, people are on their sides, they're laying down, they're vomiting in their buckets, they're some are crying, laughing, singing. And you're truly just sitting there up, looking around, watching everything, going like, what was I scammed? Like, what the hell, man? Like, this isn't, like, nothing's happening here. Um, More anger, resentment, frustration coming up inside of me. Um, she came back over and said, I'm going to give you a second cup. I was like, yeah, something better happen because, um, because this is not working clearly. So she gave me a second cup, and probably within about 15 seconds max, 10, 15, the whole world just started to go black. Um, Tunnel vision. I'm like, okay, here we go. I can feel it now. So I grabbed my whoopee, my poncho liner, and pulled it up over me, army issue poncho liner, and laid down on my yoga mat. This was all outside in the woods. Um, and now what I call going through the veil was the first thing I experienced. It's a very immersive, transcendent, uh, beautiful experience going through the veil. You see colors you've never seen before. You see sacred patterns, sacred geometry. It's it's very common. It's not universally common. Not everybody has that experience, but for most part, people will see the colors and the geometry in most psychedelics as one of the first things, and that certainly was my experience. Um, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that journey. We can talk about those at a subsequent time. But um, about an hour in, after that, the shaman comes over and she sits beside me, or in front of me actually, and we're talking about some things. And you know, I revisited a version of myself that was ancient. There's no other way to describe it. I was speaking like very gutturally, like I was, kind of like. I mean, I felt kind of like a caveman ish, right? Like I felt like a primitive man, and I wasn't very articulate. I was grunting a lot and speaking in like I said, real deep guttural. Mm, I was humming like that a lot. Like, I don't understand. Mm. Um, in my opinion, I was revisiting a past life version of me. Um, anyway, we spoke. We spoke for a while, I mean, she had 20 guests and she probably spent a half hour with me, which, for a 6 hour journey is more than my fair share of time with her. Um, and, she had a full staff and there was a lot going on. There were other people, but to my knowledge, I was kind of the first one that she came over and sat with and spent some time with and spent some time unraveling my PTSD, my anger. And that was my intention. They talk about putting your intention into the medicine, setting the intention. Intention's a huge part of plant medicine. Mine was simply not to go back to jail. I mean, it was more elaborate than that, but that was the true intent of my intention, was not going back to jail. And we talked about those things. And then at the end of that half hour, which I found profound, when I looked into her eyes, it was like diamonds. It was just white, reflective diamonds where her eyes used to be. Um, and I could feel energy around her. I could see her in a different space, right? I could see her shamanically. I could see and feel her. I could see and feel who she was shamanically more than anything. Um, so we had this conversation, and then at the end of it, and this is what I call the major plot twist of my life. Um, she leaned in. I got real close and put her hand on my left shoulder, her right hand on my left shoulder, and she just said, "Matt, I want you to know that this was orchestrated by the universe for you, and that you were brought here specifically when you were at this time, at this date, for me to inform you that you're a shaman." That was my reaction. Excuse me? Um, my first thought was kind of like, okay, I remember there being like package A, package B, package C. I don't remember there was a shaman package when I signed up for this. Maybe I missed that. I'll have to go back and look at that. And then also thinking like, and actually saying like, I don't, I didn't sign up for shaman training. Like maybe it's that dude over there. He kind of looks like me. He's bald too. I mean, that's where that went. That's how that landed on me. Um, I spent the next several days after that ceremony, after the retreat, after the weekend, talking to my girlfriend, now wife, about my experience, like trying to make some sort of sense out of all of this because it wouldn't turn off for me. Um, what I mean by that is I would go to the grocery store and I would see somebody in the aisle and I would be like, oh, that person's spirit animal is, you know, whatever, the elephant. Or, oh, that person's past life, um, she was a queen in Egypt. Like I was like, what's happening? Like literally, what the hell is happening here? And like being worried, like if am I having a psychotic breakdown? I thought the medicine would have metabolized by now. Like why? Like no, that's not what happened. What happened is my third eye, one of the chakras, blew wide open, and the things that most of us should still be able to see with our non-seeing eye, the things that are unseen, the things that are really out there, um, suddenly became visible to me, knowable, something I can experience. But again, I didn't know that at the time. I was just kind of in a panic. And my girlfriend, wife, now wife, she said, she's so wise. It's always her wisdom that sort of rescues me. And she said, I'd get a second opinion there, big guy. That's all she had to say. After like a week of me running my mouth nonstop about like what had happened and what is going on in my life. She pretty much just listened for a week, and then at the end of it all, she was like, "I'd get a second opinion, big guy." That was it. That's all she had to say. And so I went to another. I found somebody else who had, uh, I guess, lots of credibility. Went to her. Didn't tell her why I was there. I asked for something that we call a runes reading. Runes are um, a form of ancient divination. So it's like tarot for Vikings, if you will. I went to this other shaman and asked for a runes reading. Did not tell her why I was there, which was the second opinion, and asked for a runes reading. She studied the runes in front of me for about easily a half hour, um, without saying hardly anything. She said, "Okay, that's interesting," or "Oh, I didn't see that coming." Like there was this, I was just sitting back going like what have I gotten myself into here? Like this is a waste of my money. This is this is bullshit. Just all this, again, still bubbling up this resentment and doubt and everything inside of me. And she finally finished, closed all of her books, put them on shelves, and clasped her hands together and leaned in and said, "Has anyone told you recently that you're a shaman?" And yeah, recently it had probably been about a month, not even maybe, from that first cup of ayahuasca. So I was like, dang, that's two strikes. Okay, things are getting weird here. Did not see that coming. Um, but I still wasn't convinced, right? Baseball, three strikes. I still needed that third strike. I needed some. I was still on the fence. Like I didn't understand again what was happening. Um, so I thought, all right, now I know how to find ayahuasca retreats, and now I know they're out there and they're operating in some sort of gray space or white space. I don't know, but I thought, okay, I need to do this again, but this time from a different angle, from a different perspective about like this, about like what is really happening with me. And so I went to another ayahuasca retreat. Oh, and let me explain too. When she said things needed to line up before the medicine could find me, yeah, like let's talk about that. Like that was the week of my birthday, which is the week of the summer solstice. Um, there was a solar eclipse and meteor showers all that week. So when you examine things from a cosmic perspective, some significant cosmic events were happening. And I mean, if we're gonna buy into the concept that I was being called to shamanism, then yeah, that was a significant week in the cosmos with respect to the energy and to some solar and cosmic events. Um, so it was my birthday. It was the solstice. It was yeah, all that the meteor showers, the solar eclipse, and yeah. So in a way, it was kind of my birthday twice. If you're following. So I went to this second ayahuasca retreat, and I was I had some time to kill. Like they wanted you to report in at a specific time. So I had a couple hours and I found a nearby lake and park and I went there to kill time. But I thought, all right, I know these hippie people. They do this thing called meditation. I've heard of it. I mean, obviously everybody's heard of it. Don't know how to do it, but I'm gonna maybe try that because I've seen people do that before ceremony now, like in the last one. So I found a nice place in the park, and I sat down, and I closed my eyes and just started to breathe. And probably within, again, less than 30 seconds, I felt my spirit leave my body. Now, mind you, again, no medicine, completely sober. It's been several months now since the first one. I've had two people tell me that I was a shaman, two shamans telling me I was a shaman. I had no clue what was going on in my life, but I closed my eyes and started breathing real deep. And like I said, I felt my spirit leave my body. I was above my body looking down. And in an instant, my mind was flooded with memories that if you had asked me about those memories 10 minutes before the meditation, I would have said, "Excuse me, you're crazy? Like what? What are you talking about?" And what I mean by the memories I'm talking about was when I was a child, um, I had I had the ability to, or the habit of, you know, talking with the animals and talking with the plants and seeing departed souls and moving or feeling energy. Maybe not moving energy, but I could always feel energy. I could always, like, if somebody laid out a deck of cards and said, find a high card, I'd win that contest every time because I could just hold my hands over the deck. Had no clue what I was doing. I was like 8 years old. Like, but I could, I just something inside of me knew that if I held my hands over the card, I could feel the I could feel the high cards. They were vibrating differently, and I would always pull it. And I'd always get a face card or an ace. I'd always win that game. Um, so one day I said to my dad, who was a prominent figure in the religion that we were practicing at the time, which they still practice, but I don't. And it's Utah, so you can figure out which one that is. And so he was a prominent leader in the Mormon faith, and he said, "Yeah, that is the occult. That is Satan worship. Don't you ever do that again." And another thing about me is I'm adopted, and so wanting desperately to have my parents' um, love and acceptance. Of course, I followed his instructions. Of course. And when you begin to like study the human psyche and psychology and all that stuff, like that's not far fetched at all. The ability to erase in a memory, erase things from your memory. And I had buried those memories, those the memory of those experiences of um, talking and communicating with plants and animals, feeling energy, seeing departed souls. I buried those so deeply that, again, if you had asked me 10 minutes before that meditation, I would have looked at you like, "Excuse me?" No, no, no memory whatsoever of that. Literally, like up until that meditation, my memory had been wiped clean of those memories. Oh, and leaving my body. That was one of the other things, which was the key. So the moment that I just got chills talking about that. We'll talk about that another time, but there's your indicator. When your central nervous system vibrates throughout your whole body, that's a good idea. You should pay attention. Um, and that's what happened. I left my body, and in the blink of an eye, those memories of 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, probably closer to 45 at that point, um, all came flooding back. The whole thing, the conversation with dad, the comment about it being a cult, Satan worship, everything. And I was just shocked. I was stunned. being able to leave your body now. Now I know what that's called. It's called astral projection. And I used to do it as a child, and that was the moment. That's when it hit. That's the moment where I said, "Oh, oh, oh." And what I mean by that is now it's not external. It's not coming from these two women, these two so-called shamans. It's not coming from the runes. It's coming from inside. It came from inside. That's what convinced me. That's when I realized that this isn't um, this isn't something that somebody else is projecting onto me. It isn't something that I'm seeking. It is something I was born with and forgot for a real long time and had come home when the timing was right. And so, just for added clarification before the haters start dropping comments, I don't consider myself a shaman. Um, to me, there's a great big well, let me say it this way. Shamans are from Siberia. It's a Siberian word. It means the one that sees. Um, it's an ancient word. However, there is anthropological words that were created less than 100 years ago to describe associated activities. So we can say shamanically or shamanism or shamanic and still hold um, respect for the Siberian tradition and culture. This is a heavily nuanced part of the conversation um, because there are still, there are people out there who are definitely shamanic but don't use it, and then there's people out there who are not shamanic who do use it, and so that's part of like navigating this space. Um, when somebody's seeking a shamanic practitioner, in my estimation, there's the family of of shamanic workers. Okay, and within that family, there are shamans from Siberia, and then there's a whole host of other types of healers or workers. There are, Reiki masters, even yogis and yoga instructors. If you go back and look at the ancient texts, yoga and yoga instructors were shamanic. And what I mean by that, when I say shamanic and in that shamanic family, having lots of degrees of alignment and overlap in terms of understanding of energy, techniques for working with energy, um, you know, having being grounded in the same belief systems with respect to the universe. That's the shamanic family. Within that shamanic family, like I said, you may have shamans from Siberia. You may have light workers. You might have in South America the names. Sometimes they're called shamans, but that's not exactly true. Really, I hear the names curanderos or ayahuasqueros or taitas if you're in Colombia. You have Reiki masters. I mentioned yogis. You have druids. You have indigo children, star seeds. There's there's a lot of um, members of the family, so to speak, and they're all, in my estimation, shamanic. And the other thing too is we don't need to be hung up on titles. I think that only sometimes that I maybe identify as a shaman is when somebody gets introduced to me and they by somebody else and they reach out and I get a text like, hey, I was given your name or I was given your card or your information and I was told that you're a shaman. Well, I'm not going to spend, 10 minutes educating them on the nuances of language and meaning and the difference between ancient words and anthropological words. And I can just, yeah, how can I help? Right. Um, Technically, what I identify within that shamanic family is as a satyr. And you spell that Seidr. Seidr, satyr. And that is a Norse pagan shaman, or not necessarily pagan. It also animism, and what a great segue, and something that we can talk about at another time. And I'm even gonna make a note about it right now, as we deep dive it. But animism. I mean, animism's been found to have been practiced all over the world at some of our earliest moments as human beings. Okay, so talking like 100,000 years or more back, and it was a simple belief in nature. Like that's animism. It's the idea that um, we are not separate, we are not overlords, or not subject to. Um, we're not rulers over. Um, we are part of nature. We are as much a part of nature as this tree outside of my window, or the bird perched in it, or the earth, or the ocean, or the rivers, or the mountains. We're all just parts of one great big whole, which is nature. And understanding how nature works. And I don't mean just from, like, say, pollination or photosynthesis and things like that. I mean, like, understanding what's coming to light now. Like, if you're paying attention, you're starting to see a lot of weird things in the news about scientific discoveries. Like, so for example, your plants can sense your arrival at home when you're 2 kilometers away. Like, if you don't think that you're part of nature, like you need to you need to sit down and Google some stuff, man, because the truth of the matter is, you are connected to nature, whether you like it or not, whether you're aware of it or not, in ways that you would never begin to imagine. And that's animism. And animism or shamanism has its roots in animism, because in those early human experiences and realizing our ancestors, knowing and realizing their connection to the energy and their place within nature, um, is some of the fundamental principles and beliefs and practices of shamanism. How to be in nature, how to use nature, how to use the energy that um, grounds all of nature, defines all of it, helps nature exist. So yeah, I consider myself a satyr, which is the Norse tradition. I've had 4 mentors. The woman who did the runes reading was my first, and then I was taught plant medicine ceremonies from a man who had received his training in Peru. Then I have a mentor in Colombia who I try to take people to visit, and to do ayahuasca down there in his domain, in his jungle, on his sacred land. And then I have the piece that I had been missing for quite a while was my Scandinavian. I'm I'm kind of from northern. My ancestors are from northern Denmark, southern Sweden, on my mother's side, my birth mother's side, and Germany on my birth father's side. And so if I wear my Seder uh, tattoos um, because of my connection to my ancestors, to that land, to those traditions. But for the longest time, I was studying them sort of from afar. Here's a couple books that are just sitting on my desk right now that I'm working through. But this talks about the northern tradition of shamanism. Um, and again, shamanism, right? So I went on one of my final homework assignments was pilgrimage, and I did. I pilgrimed to Scandinavia, and um, and I did it in a traditional pilgrimage way, being supported by the universe. No plans, no money. Just bought the ticket and landed, and let the universe carry me, support me. And it was in that experience that and that was the intention. I set an intention for that pilgrimage, and it was to find a mentor, and I did, and I found a man who I just love so dearly, um, who is also a veteran of Vietnam, has been practicing shamanism for 45 years in a Scandinavian way. And so those four have been my mentors throughout all these years and continue to be my mentors, continue to teach me, continue to study under them and learn. And yeah, that's what I do. I see, two of my mentors, the second gentleman who had learned in Peru, and the third one I mentioned, who's in Colombia. Both both deal with and work with plant medicine. Um, the first one, the woman that I went to for the runes reading, as well as the last one in Scandinavia, don't touch plant medicine at all. So, in some ways, I'm very much a hybrid. Um, Shamanism does not have to have anything to do with plant medicine whatsoever. It's energy. I like to look at it like this. Um, if me and the person that I'm working with are not going to be in plant medicine, I can still move the energy and still do the things I need to do, but it's as though I am moving a pile of dirt with a plastic spoon and a Dixie cup. I can still move it, it's just a little more difficult. If one of us is in plant medicine, say me, for example, while I work on you, I'm moving it with a shovel and a wheelbarrow. I'll get that pile of dirt moved a lot quicker. If we're both in plant medicine, it's like having like a bulldozer, right? It can move the energy really quickly. So, but it's not required. So I see really, um, I really see the world in this way, the shamanic world. Um, there's plant medicine that falls within ceremony. So ceremony may or may not have involved plant medicine, which then falls within shamanism, because every time a shaman or a satyr or a light worker, a druid, a witch, a warlock, a medicine person, whatever you want to call them, Reiki masters, whenever they perform those rites and rituals, they're doing it ceremonially. So ceremony lives within the greater context of that shamanic world. And then really the role of that, all those different roles I talked about within the family of shamanism, well, um, that's just a role within the greater context of what's really going on in this world. We live at a very critical, really pivotal time. The world is transitioning, and we're going to deep dive that as well. In fact, that's what the whole point of this channel, podcast, social media effort is to talk about from a cosmic perspective what is going on in the cosmos, which is, where we reside here on Earth. Like, we have to keep in mind contextually, you know, where we fit into the universe, because it's, you know, it's like being an ant clinging to a little tiny piece of a leaf, floating on a lake where boulders are falling off the cliff into that lake because lightning struck above it. Like the little tiny ant probably is just thinking about, you know, survival, clinging to that little tiny piece of leaf, hoping that it, you know, he washes on shore someday. That can life can feel that way a lot of times, clinging to our leaves, not understanding why the waves are the way they are, not understanding what the lightning is or the thunder or why the boulders are falling. Um, that's the human experience. The human experience isn't just about what's going here on in your life. It's not just what's going on, even in the world. We have to remember that we are, um, an important part of the universe, but only a part. There are things that are going on in this universe, in the cosmos, um, from also from a historical place, as well as driven by energy, um, driven by patterns, um, and to the greater degree that we can come to know and understand what is going on in the big picture of things, can really help us navigate, you know, the small picture. So that's the intent of going forward, to talk about those things, to help people, um, find healing, physical and emotional, which are the same thing. We're going to get into that too, talking about, how mental illness manifests physically and physical illness manifests mentally. And there's really only one wellness, and it's wholeness. It's when we bring our personas, our physical body and our spiritual body, into homeostasis, um, you know, so that there's no, poisons or toxins, whether that be the chemicals in your water or, negative self-talk. They're both toxins. And cleaning out the toxins in our persona, and then allowing that, positive energy, connection to the divine, connection to self, connection to others, connection to nature, all the same thing. Then our bodies return to homeostasis, and it's from that place that our bodies will heal themselves, both physically and emotionally. That's what we're going to talk about. All right. I look forward to the journey.